My name's Bonnie Bewick. I'm a violinist in the Boston Symphony, and I'm happy to have you with me today. I've been in the orchestra for many years, and when I was 8 years old, I went to an instrument demonstration at my school. I wonder if any of you have been to instrument demonstrations, and maybe some of you started this way too. Neither one of my parents were musicians, no music in my family, and I went to this petting zoo of instruments and I picked up the violin and I thought, this is cool. So I went home and showed it to my parents, and there was some kind of deal where you could rent the instrument for free for the year or something, and it really sealed the deal for me. And I had a great time in my school music program for the first year. Started taking private lessons after that, and I was pretty much hooked on playing the violin. It was something that I really, really enjoyed doing all my life. Here we have a violin. It's the smallest of the stringed instruments, and as you can see, it has 4 strings. It's tuned G, D, A, E in fifths. And the violins usually have 2 sections in the orchestra, first and second violins. They sit over here on the stage. So the violin, I change the strings probably twice a year. Here we have the bow. It has horse hair from the tail of the horse, because each of the hairs on the bow hair has little tiny pricks on it that pluck the bow millions of times as you draw the hair across the strings. Can you hear all those plucks? I bet you can't. But anyway, that combination of drawing the bow across the strings and the resonance of the strings gives this beautiful sound that you hear. So I changed the strings. You have to rehair the bow because those little tiny points get dull. They wear down over time. So you have to take care of that. Get the bow rehaired a couple of times a year. Every time I play, you must rosin the bow, which is this sticky tree sap that goes on the bow to make those prickly points sticky. But that gets dusty, and it gets rosin on the strings, and it clouds up and it gets underneath here. So after I play, every time I take a cloth and I wipe down the strings and I wipe down any place that there's rosin on the violin. And about once a year I have to get it cleaned, because where it hits your neck and this, where you play gets a little dirty, so you have to clean it. Other parts, here's the chin rest. Some people have their chin rest, maybe off to the side a little bit more. It's a little bit of an individual placement here. And on the back, there's a shoulder rest, not to be confused with the chin rest. Shoulder rest back here. And that just helps it not slide off my shoulders. So I can hold it, I can walk around, I can view what's going on around me, and like I tell my students, this helps this angle of being straight like this. And when it goes down like this, I tell my students not to dump your picnic into the ground, as if there were a picnic set up on this. You don't want to dump it down into the ground. So the shoulder rest just helps that angle stay straight, and this angle stay true also. This year I've done an enormous amount of teaching, and I've really delved into what it means to be a good student and what it means to be a good teacher. And I came up with a little set of rules. I've always had Bonnie's rules of practice, but a little set of rules to help each practice session. And this really does apply whether you are a seasoned professional or whether you're just a beginner. And it also applies to other things besides music. The first one is decide what you want to accomplish that day. That's a no-brainer, but it really helps you to organize your practice time. What do you want to do? Ask questions. This is the second one. Treat yourself like a learner. Ask yourself questions. It can be as broad a question as you want, as broad a question as, why doesn't this sound the way I want it to sound? to a very focused question, such as, why is this shift tricky? Or why does this string crossing sound scratchy, like when I go from string, and why do I hit other strings? Ask yourself questions, and your answers to those questions are going to really propel you to the next level. Always remember that if it's hard for you, it's hard for everybody. And how you solve those challenges is what makes you a better artist. And again, this applies to baseball, this applies to tennis, this applies to painting, this applies to math. Why is this difficult? And then answer those questions. And then the third step, which I think is vitally important, is own it. Once you're done your practice session, you need to take ownership of the work that you've just done. And you can do that in any number of ways. You can give a little mini performance of the 4 lines that you just spent 20 minutes on, or you can decide how you would explain what you just did to somebody else. Those are 2 important ways that I find are really useful for that last step of ownership. And I find that own it step, no matter how you do it, but if you find a way to take ownership and to really nail in what you've just done, that's like pressing the save button. And when you come back to your work the next day, then it's there, or a bigger percentage of it is there than if you hadn't done that last step. And I find that vitally important and really useful for myself and for my students. Here's a small exercise that helps with bow finger flexibility. This is something that comes a little later in the game. When you first learn how to hold the bow correctly, you have a little formula for setting all your fingers on the bow, and then you set it in motion. But as you can see, the bow changes start out pretty sticky. And what you want to do eventually is take that bow grip and get a little bit of flexibility in the fingers, not just for the sake of the motion, but to cushion the bow changes and to make them smooth and flowing. So if you start at the tip, this is the crabby part of the bow, so we're going to start at the tip and we're going to go to the frog and we're going to make some bow changes to the frog that involve the fingers, and then we're going to do it again at the tip. Oops, sorry, Mr. Microphone. It's not rocket science. It's just a little bit of physics that when someone invented this bow and someone invented this violin, at some point they had to figure out how to make a smooth sound. So we're just going with that. Every day I figure I do a little bit of inventing myself. How do I make this bow change smooth? How do I make it jumpy? How do I make it choppy? How do I make it powerful? So I'm always asking myself those questions, but the flexibility of your hand on the bow is of utmost importance. So if you can start with just trying to get a little bit of finger flexibility, then if you really break it down one step further, I am starting the down bow with my hand and finishing the up bow with my fingers. But it's really not even worth thinking that much about, because all it is just trying to use your hand to flex that bow change a little bit to make it a little smoother. And your own, how you're wired will help with that, if you just know that that's what you want it to do. So try this exercise of just of that at the frog and then at the tip. And see if that doesn't open some doors for you. To be a valuable ensemble player, it's not enough to just practice your part. Practicing your own music at home is just a given. If you're going to show up and be part of an ensemble, whether it's a full orchestra or a string quartet or even a duo, knowing your own part is step one. Knowing how your part fits with the rest of the group is just as important as knowing your own part. So that's the next work that is on your docket for the day, if you will. Learn your part and figure out how it fits in with the rest of the orchestra. I do a lot of coaching for orchestral auditions, and if I ask a player, well, what role do you play right now in this passage that you're playing? And if they don't know that, then that's homework that they need to do. But knowing that and knowing that maybe the part that you're playing needs to be really flexible because the oboe has a solo and you're playing something wavy underneath, or knowing that what you're playing is of utmost importance and everybody else in the orchestra is just bowing to the first violin section or to the first violin or second violin part in the quartet. Knowing what your role is extra important. And another key tip that I would make is to say that your rhythm, it's not just about you. And rhythm is something that is not on the page. Your rhythm is something that's inside, and it's a pulse that you need to really key into. And never forget that as you play with somebody else, your pulse, your inner pulse and their inner pulse need to collide somehow. So you need to, it helps to know what they're playing and how your part fits in with them. But the rhythm needs to come from a framework that's very, very solid before you can then decide how to be musical and how to flex it a little bit. So I would say knowing your part, knowing how your part fits with others, and having really, really solid rhythm. Intonation too, but that's part of step one, isn't it? Doing your practicing. So those three key points, I think, are important in what you bring to your ensemble. Lastly, I want to leave you with the idea that the reason you play an instrument, you might want to ask yourself, what is the reason? Why do I play this instrument? Back long ago when the first instruments were being invented, it was to call people to a gathering or to alert the tribe of predators. But it soon became something that was entertaining and something that was community building. And even in an orchestra, we are building community and we are entertaining and we're bringing a gift and a talent and a treasure to an audience. So whether you're sitting around a campfire or entertaining in a big, beautiful concert hall, it's important to always remember that you play your instrument to entertain and to enrich other people, and not just to perfect or to achieve something. So think about that, and when you're frustrated, just ask yourself, why am I doing this? And get back a little bit to what it really means to build community with music. Here's a collection of 3 fiddle tunes from Canada, which gets its roots from Scotland. Gillespie's Mazurka, the Baker's Reel, and the Calgary Polka.